Let's be honest, most of us hate the Logginglocos. I don't need to tell you why they're hated. When I'd be listing off the stuff, you would just be saying, "That's right!" But because of the hate these characters rightfully get, we tend to ignore them for being so awful. But what if we actually try to give these characters a chance? Well, that's where I come in. I am not ignoring these characters. In fact, I'm going to piece together their lore, real-life basis lore, and at the end, come up with a theory on how they might got to be the characters we know them as today. The show has a lot to cover, so instead, let's start with their real-life basis. Ferdinand is a Climax Class C locomotive, built in 1897 by Climax Locomotive Works with the original designs made by Charles D. Scott. This was the final iteration of Charles's engine. The Class A, B, and C locomotives were really popular for logging railways in America and Canada, due to them being easy to modify. There were at least 1,000 of these locomotives made. Ferdinand is one of the 1,000 Class C locomotives to have a wooden cab instead of a steel one. The steel cabs were more popular than the wooden ones as time went on, so it's interesting to see that he has one. I guess the designers really wanted to push the logging look these characters have, so they chose the wooden cabs. In the late 1920s, the need for these locomotives was getting smaller and smaller, so the owners of the Climax Locomotive Works sold their company, and the buyers would finish up the few engines that were being worked on. But after that, Ferdinand's class would get replaced with new locomotives across railways. Also, something of note, some of these locomotives ran on coal, which is way more effective of an energy source than logs. So it is possible that Ferdinand has used coal at some point in his life. Ferdinand has a pretty standard build history, in all honesty. But the builder Charles D. Scott's story is honestly way more interesting, and I recommend Train of Thought's video on these Climax locomotives if you want to hear more about the story. But I'm only here for Ferdinand, which is why I'm not getting into it. Ferdinand probably would be one of the earlier locomotives out of his entire class to be made, which would explain his wooden cab. Now on to Bash and Dash. Now, I have a headcanon, and that headcanon is for most engines in the series to be fictional add-ons unless specified otherwise. It just kind of makes more sense in my head. I don't like the idea of like a locomotive is just missing from real life, but I also think it's cool when there is real life locomotives that are in the show. It's cool either way. This is usually just my own headcanon. Now, it is never a big deal when that headcanon is broken because it's just my headcanon. But with Bash and Dash, I mean, it doesn't even work in the slightest. They have to be the real-life locomotives due to the extremely small number of locomotives their bases has had. Like, Bash and Dash are a Frankenstein design combining the Bear Harbor Railway and Lumber Co.'s Falk engine. The Bear Harbor Railroad in 1892 in San Francisco. It would haul material known as tan bark to the Bear Harbor Wharf. Falk was also built in San Francisco, but was built prior to the Bear Harbor. Now, for some reason, when they were designing Bash and Dash, they moved its gear to the back instead of them having it in the front, and then took the Falk's wooden cab, altered it where you couldn't see inside, gave them these huge, ugly doors on their sides, and then called it a day. I genuinely hate how inaccurate their designs are to the source material. It's not like they've never done this before. I mean, just look at Thomas, Percy, James, and so on. I mainly hate it because of how cool these two locomotives look in real life, and then Bash and Dash don't even look that cool. I also hate what this implies to the lore of the show. Heavily modified them. And then they also made them twins when in real life, the locomotive with a bunch of differences. It makes me a little bit annoyed. It's a little bit irrational for sure, but I just like to think they're either these locomotives or they're fictional add-ons. And it's hard to say they're either of these because their designs are so drastically different to the real-life counterparts. But these are the real-life Logginglocos. Now let's move on to the show, and I'll try to piece together the lore of the characters in canon. I think we all know they made their first appearance in the movie MistyIslandRescue. Most of us remember this movie for having these characters and also having the MistyIslandRescue, here we go. But this movie was not made with the intention to have your brain on while watching it, in case that wasn't clear. The movie introduced this type of wood called Joby wood. It's pretty rare and it's the strongest wood in the world. Now, wood in terms of running for steam engines, wood tends to not be as good as coal. The Logginglocos, I think they use Joby wood. It would be dumb to use this resource considering how rare it is, but it also makes sense considering that's probably all they have at this point. But if they don't use Joby wood for fuel, they have to use a different type of wood. Where's the other type of wood? We only see Joby wood trees. At least that's what I'm guessing. I don't know, it makes me really confused. They also constantly talk about running low on fuel in the movie, so I'm surprised they don't use any spare Joby wood for fuel. It's also clear they have a bunch of extra Joby wood they're just wasting, and they're also ruining the environment with pointless wood cutting and with the materials being littered all across the island. They also use oil somehow just in the movie too, so I'm guessing at some point in their lives on Misty Island, due to the fuel shortages, they were all modified to be able to use oil with wood too. But they also talk about them being low on oil, so they have to use oil and logs for fuel. This seems rather pointless. For the railway they work on, it's a logging railway. It seems like this logging railway was not that well funded, considering how damaged everything is and how objects like this bathtub are just being placed at random. They probably had to just use what they had to keep the railway running. For some reason, this railway, which has an incredibly desired type of wood, had to have gone bankrupt, and all that's left are the locomotives and whoever is driving them all. They're rather content with their lives on the island until Thomas comes along and makes them become working class engines. There are some pros, like they got to be repainted and fixed up a little bit, and their land gets harvested for the wood, but let's be honest, it's not like they were using that wood responsibly in the first place. But in most episodes, it seems like they've never fully adapted to their lives on Sodor. I question the Logginglocos are even happy working on Sodor. We see them at their own island and railway having a wonderful time. The only problem is that they have low fuel and oil, and I guess they do feel they missed out on never having a winter holiday party as seen in Merry Misty Island. But besides those two things, they don't mind only having each other and are overall happy. But for some reason, Thomas feels like he needs to get them on Sodor, so he takes them with him and Topham and has them work for the railway. In other episodes, we see them rather uncomfortable on Sodor. For one, all three of them are pushovers, and it's rare for most of the engines to even listen to them. Hobie doesn't listen to Bash, and the unfamiliar environments make him extremely scared. Gordon doesn't listen to Ferdinand's safety concerns, which ends up with his Lion of Sodor statue ending up in the mud. And Emily doesn't listen to Nash when he explained his neat whistle trick used up a lot of fuel, which ended up with him running out of fuel. And even Thomas doesn't listen to them in the movie. You think that they are generally disliked, but surprisingly no. The workmen love Ferdinand, and they all leave a good impression on Dowager Hat. None of the humans seem to have a problem with them. But the main problem with these characters is that in the show, they are never explored and are just plot devices to the other engines. We only ever got one single episode with all three of them as the main characters, so it's really difficult trying to find out what makes all of them have their own unique character. But here's what I found. Let's go over the characteristics they all share first. All of them are very resourceful. They manage their limited fuel supply well, they know how to operate their railway well, and while they didn't end up well, they did set up an entire winter holiday party on their own, even if they all knew it wasn't that good in the first place. I like to think that the Logginglocos are like tour guides. They love showing others who visit their home what it's about and the sights to see. It would honestly kind of be interesting if the writers didn't suck during this era. Alright, now onto the characters themselves. Ferdinand. He is a character who keeps to himself, really only reassuring that stuff is right most of the time, while every now and then he says something else, mainly if something is off. He's a rather safe engine, surprisingly, and probably due to his unique design, he is liked by a lot of people. And, that's kinda it. Bash is rather extroverted. He loves having fun and he enjoys working, but he is really sensitive to his environment. He doesn't do well around animals that he's never seen before. He's not a fan of most places on Sodor, with the only one he loved being Toby's shed. He's an engine who does not do well outside of his comfort zone or loud noises. Wow, this actually could be interesting. I wonder what they did with it. Oh right, Dash, just like Bash, is extroverted, but he's really not bothered by much. He doesn't seem to care what environment he is in, and he's just in it for the ride. He really enjoys entertaining, and he's the most brutally honest of the three. Wow, that's it? Seriously? I think it's a miracle they gave us these tiny things to differentiate the three. It is clear they were just written to be the same. Bash and Dash wouldn't return after season 16. Thank goodness! And Ferdinand would show up one last time in the background of a season 18 episode, and we never saw them again. So here's my headcanon on the stories of these three locomotives. Ferdinand, Bash, and Dash would have worked on their original railways in America, until one day a very experimental railway all the way in the UK offered to buy up some now outdated American locomotives. Ferdinand would be the first to arrive, but all of this work for one engine just wasn't practical. The owner of the railway had made a lot of money off of his Joby wood, so he bought these two random locomotives, Bash and Dash. They showed up around the same time, and they looked like they could be brothers. So the owner named them Bash and Dash, due to the way they would hit flatbeds really hard and go incredibly fast for their size. The Misty Island Logging Railway seemed like a great railway, but due to the cheaply built bridges in other buildings, and the owners and employees being rather careless if their customers actually got their orders on time, less and less companies would buy, leaving the railway bankrupt. The owner took what was left of the funds and disappeared. The crew showed up to work the next day to then just see nobody there. It was like a ghost town. Realizing no one was coming back to this railway, the engines and the crew realized they could basically just do whatever they wanted. So it's exactly what they did, until Thomas showed up. You know what happens in the show, all the way up until season 17. During this time, the big important projects that needed Joby wood were already completed. So Topham didn't need Bash or Dash anymore to pull these trains of Joby wood. So occasionally, whenever there's a project that needs repairs or required Joby wood, Ferdinand was sent to deliver the Joby wood, due to his speed and strength. The Logginglocos are still happy in working all the way until the show ended, but Topham's interest in Joby wood would end up being more of a fad than he realized. Alright, and that was the Logginglocos. I try my best to do anything with these characters in terms of analysis and trying to connect their backstories together. It's kind of sad that the actual writers of the show did not care about them at all. And not gonna lie, I don't blame them. These are not good characters. So I hope that this video was somewhat interesting for you. And that is it from me. And I am so glad I never have to cover these characters again. I hate them.